The wind howled through the bare branches like a wounded creature, carrying with it the scent of smoke and sorrow. Beneath the grey morning sky, a young man stood by the riverbank, his boots sunk deep into the mud. His clothes were torn, his hands raw, and his eyes, once full of light, were darkened with something that looked like loss. The pigs grunted nearby, oblivious to the world's cruelty, their snouts buried in the damp earth. His name was Elias, and once he had been a prince. He had not spoken that truth in months. To the villagers of Bracken Hollow, he was just the new swineherd, quiet, diligent, and strange. They did not ask questions, and he did not offer answers. Yet every night, as he led the pigs back into their pen and watched the sun fade over the distant hills, he thought of her, Princess Adelina, the woman who had laughed at him before the entire court. And in the echo of that laughter, he had lost everything. I, the prince who wasn't enough. Elias had been a prince of modest renown, born not of a great empire but of a small and weary kingdom that had seen better days. His father, King Aldric, was old and tired of war. His mother had died before he could remember her face. But Elias had something his court considered a flaw, a love of the ordinary. He spent his hours in the gardens, studying plants and crafting small inventions, wind chimes that sang in the rain, bottles that turned dew into drinking water, and lamps that glowed with trapped fireflies. The people adored him for his gentle curiosity, but the court sneered. When King Aldric arranged a union between Elias and Princess Adelina of the Northern Realm, a proud and beautiful woman known for her cold wit, Elias believed it might be his chance to prove that heart and thought could be as noble as steel and gold. He presented her with 2 gifts of his own making, a rose that, when touched, sang the softest melody of dawn, and a silver nightingale that could mimic any sound it heard, laughter, thunder, even the whisper of a sigh. Adelina had looked at the gifts, then at him. And she laughed. Not softly, not kindly. Her laughter had been sharp as glass, echoing across the marble hall. A prince who plays with toys, she said, and dares to call them love. The court joined her laughter. Elias felt something inside him split, not his pride, but something deeper. The part that still believed that kindness could ever be enough. He left that night. 2. Among pigs and shadows. In Bracken Hollow, he found work tending swine for an old farmer named Marek, who neither pitied nor questioned him. The pigs don't care for names or crowns, Marek had said, handing him a pail of feed. They just want to be fed and kept safe. That's more than can be said for most folk. And so Elias worked. He rose before dawn, mended fences, and slept under the stars. The simplicity was a balm, but not a cure. He still built things, small contraptions out of scrap metal and river stones, but he hid them from sight. It was during one of those quiet nights that he first saw her again. Princess Adelina had arrived in Bracken Hollow disguised as a commoner, though the villagers whispered her name behind closed doors. Her father's kingdom had fallen to rebellion. She was on the run, stripped of her wealth and safety. When Elias saw her, she was sitting by the well, her hands trembling as she tried to light a fire. He recognized her instantly, not by her face, but by the way she held herself, like someone who refused to bow even when the world had already forced her to her knees. He did not reveal himself. Not yet. 3. The test of humility. In the weeks that followed, Adelina worked alongside the villagers, her pride hidden under dirt and exhaustion. But she was not made for this life. Her hands blistered, her clothes tore, and her eyes burned with humiliation. It was Elias who helped her quietly, leaving her food when she had none, fixing her roof in the night, mending her tools. She noticed, of course. One evening, she caught him by the well. "You," she said, tilting her head. "You're the one who keeps leaving things at my door." Elias smiled faintly. "I suppose I am." "Why?" "Because someone once told me that gifts mean nothing," he said softly, "unless they come from a heart willing to give." She frowned, as though the words pricked at something buried deep inside her. "You speak like a poet, Swineherd." He looked up at her then, meeting her eyes fully for the first time in years. And you speak like a queen who's forgotten she has no crown. She stepped back, startled. Do I know you? Not anymore, he said, and walked away. 4. The return of the crown. Winter came hard that year. Crops failed, and the villagers whispered of raiders from the north. One night, the sky turned the color of blood, and a band of men on horseback descended upon Bracken Hollow. They called themselves the Iron Wolves, soldiers without masters, seeking food, gold, and vengeance. The village burned. Elias fought as best he could, wielding nothing but a broken staff. He managed to lead the swine and a handful of villagers into the woods, but Adelina was missing. Panic rose in his chest, not as a prince or a man wronged, but as someone who could not bear to lose her again, not this way. He found her cornered near the river, clutching one of his old inventions, the silver nightingale. Somehow, she had kept it all these years. A raider struck her across the face, the bird falling into the mud. Before Elias could think, he lunged. The fight was brutal and brief. He was outmatched, but desperation lent him strength. When it was over, the raiders fled, and Elias collapsed beside her, blood mixing with rain. Adelina reached out, trembling, and picked up the nightingale. She turned the key, and it sang, the same melody he had made for her so long ago. I was cruel, she whispered. And I've paid for it every day since. He tried to speak, but his breath came shallow. It doesn't matter anymore. Yes, it does, she said fiercely. Because you were the only one who ever saw me for what I could be, not what I was. The swineherd's legacy. Elias survived, though his wounds never fully healed. The raiders never returned, and the villagers rebuilt with Adelina's help. She never reclaimed her title, though she could have. Instead, she chose to stay. People began to speak of the swineherd and the woman who had once been a princess. They said he taught her how to see the beauty in small things, the warmth of the fire, the hum of the wind, the trust of an animal that had never known deceit. And sometimes, when the moon was bright, they heard the nightingales sing from their small cottage by the woods. Years passed, and stories grew. Some said the swineherd was a fallen prince who had learned the price of pride. Others said he was just a man who had loved too deeply and too well. But in truth, Elias had become something rarer than both. He had become free. 6. The last song. On the day Elias died, the wind was gentle, and the pigs slept peacefully in the pen. Adelina sat beside him, her hair streaked with silver, her eyes as fierce as ever. He smiled faintly. You remember the rose that sang? She nodded. I never told you, it was your laughter that gave it voice. Even when it hurt, I wanted to remember it. To turn cruelty into something that could still be beautiful. Her tears fell silently. You fool, she whispered. You turned pain into music. He closed his eyes, his breath fading. That's all I ever wanted. After he was gone, Adelina took the silver nightingale and placed it on his chest. When she turned the key, it began to sing again, but this time, the sound was not of sorrow, nor of love lost. It was of peace. The villagers say that, in the years that followed, the pigs would sometimes gather at the riverbank and lift their heads to the wind, as if listening for something only they could hear. And if you pass through Bracken Hollow on a quiet night, when the stars are sharp and the air is still, you might hear it too, a song made from laughter, forgiveness, and the heart of a swineherd who was once a prince.